let's go through the setup for VS Code here, and especially or particularly for Java programming. So we show up to VS Code, Visual Studio Code, and we got nothing open. So first thing we got to do is open a file. Or open our project folder that we'd like to open. So up here in the file menu, we can go to open folder. You could also use the keyboard shortcut. I'm going to get my test project open, and here we go. So this is an example. It's a really small main program with a dog class. So in dog.java, we got just a simple little class here with a bunch of small methods. So if we go here, though, there's nothing we can do. We cannot run this code, so we need to go and install some extensions so that VS Code can deal with Java and can run Java programs. So I'm just going to go through a quick list of the extensions that I use, and hopefully that'll help you guys. So we'll go here, we'll search for Java. So we've got just a few things we'd like to do. The first thing is the language support for Java. Maybe I can make this a little bit bigger. So language support for Java. We also would like the project manager. I can show that in a second video. The debugger is something we're going to use. So we just installed 3 extensions, and then we also want something called code runner. And we'll use that in other different scenarios. Cool. So if we look in our extensions, if we stop searching, again, the 4 extensions we installed were language support, debugger, project manager, and code runner. Excellent. Cool. So you could have more extensions than that, but those 4 are at least what I use. And then I think it asked us to reload the window, and I did not do that. So to reload the window and to do basically anything, you can hit on Mac Command-Shift-P, or on Windows Control-Shift-P, and you can look for reload, and so reload window. So if you change something like extension, something like that, it'll often require you to reload the window. Okay. Or you could just close out the app, open it again. Either one would work. Now we get to the app, and you see things look a little bit different. We've got this run button up at the top, and so there's a couple ways that this run button might work. If we go up here, we can click this little drop down. There's run code, run Java, debug Java. We'll get through all of those. But if we run Java, it's going to compile. It's going to show the compiler output, and then it's going to show all these print statements. That's all well and good. That is certainly useful. But what we'd also like to go through in this video is how to use the debugger. So a debugger is something that is built into an editor or an IDE like Visual Studio Code, and it allows us to walk through the program one step at a time. So to get the debugger going, there's one key concept we need, which is what is a breakpoint. So on the left-hand side of the editor, next to all the lines of code, you'll see these little red circles are appearing. And so when you put these are called breakpoints. When you click, you'll see that red circle stays. And that's a breakpoint, which means that when you go to, instead of running the code, if you debug the code, it'll go through, it'll try and run the code, and it'll stop anytime it gets to a breakpoint. So again, if we click just run code, then same thing will happen. Docker is a new dog, blah, blah, blah. No big deal. Breakpoint didn't do anything. In order for the breakpoint to matter and for it to pause the code and allow us to do all this stuff, we have to click debug Java. So now it'll compile. We'll see the compiler output. And now you can see it stopped. Okay. So nothing is going to happen. We could sit here all day. The program would never finish. In order to get the program to keep going, do all our print statements, run the whole program, we've got this little menu up at the top. So there's a few buttons. Really the 2 that matter to us are the play button. So the play button means continue. So what that's going to do is it's going to run through the program, until the next breakpoint. So now it's like we just unpause and we just run through. We see all the same print statements we saw before. But let's see what those other buttons do. So now actually our play button is going to run it in the debugger for what it's worth. But if we go back, we say debug Java, same thing happens. All right, we're going to get paused right here. So then the second button that's really the most useful one for us in the debugger is the step over button. So the step over button allows us to go one line at a time through the program. Okay, so we just step through every single line, and now all of the code has happened. We're paused on the last line, and I guess for what it's worth, the yellow highlighting means that we are about to do that line of code. We're not quite done. But let's look, there's a lot of useful stuff. Really, the reason we want to use the debugger, and we can collapse some of these windows. The reason that the debugger is so helpful, maybe I can make this a little bit bigger, is that on this left-hand side, we get access, or we have the ability to see all of the different variables that are in scope in our program. So we see our main method has these args, it has that parameter. So we saw the args, we see D, the dog, the thing we made on line 6. We made a name variable on line 8 by calling the getName method. Then we had a couple other variables here, morning minutes, afternoon minutes. We have the values of all of these variables. For variables that are instances of classes, so for example, this D is an instance of the dog class, you can actually expand the class instance here, so this dog instance, and you can see the different member variables that that instance of the dog class has. So the name of this dog was Docker. I think I had another instance variable called Hey, and we can maybe dive into the dog class real quick if we want. But there we go. One thing to note, so we did step over, we press this line, go one line at a time button. We pressed that a bunch of times. We're on the last line. This is kind of a gotcha with the debugger. If you hit step over again, it's going to go to that last curly brace, and you go step over again, it's going to jump into some code that has absolutely nothing to do with your program and is internal stuff to Java, and it's going to look super confusing. And in debuggers, if you step in the wrong places or if there's an error, you might get into a situation like this. If you get here, don't worry about it. Just press play, and it'll run through the rest of the code until it gets back to a breakpoint that you know about, or it's just going to finish the code. So if you get this file open and it's something you've never seen in your whole life, don't worry about it. There's plenty of code that runs in a Java program that isn't code that you wrote. That's all this stuff about the Java runtime and system and that kind of stuff. That does not matter. But as the debugger is going through line by line, sometimes it might really, truly, the next thing that happens in your program might be something in the Java runtime that has nothing to do with what you wrote. If you get there, just hit the continue button, and I'll show that again. So, not run Java. So I hit run instead of debug. Well, that's a classic problem. If you're expecting your breakpoint to show up and you click run instead of debug, nothing's going to happen. So again, we have to hit debug so our breakpoint happens. So we're able to step through the code one line at a time. Then again, we get to the end, and we're in this weird situation. We don't know what to do. There's weird code that we've never seen before in our life about threads. We don't know what that is. It's fine. We just press the continue button. The continue button is going to just run the code as normal until it gets to another breakpoint. It's all good. Cool. So just another note about breakpoints in the debugger. If we go back to our files for the project, we can look at the dog.java class, and we can actually add breakpoints wherever we'd like in the program. So let's maybe change, which So let's change this go outside method to, we can just do like, we're going to do some fancy formula, okay? So we could say equals 15 times 100 times 11 divided by 60, all right? So we did some, this is calculating the number of minutes we're going to take our dog out. We did some amazing formula. This is obviously a joke test, but this go outside method now has 2 lines of code. It computes some crazy thing, and then it's going to return the result there, that int variable from that method. What we can do now is we're allowed to add as many breakpoints as we'd like, and we can add them in whatever file we'd like. So now we're going to add a breakpoint in the go outside method in the dog class. So now we can maybe see what's going to happen as we go through this. So we're going to hit debug Java again. Okay, so it goes to the first breakpoint. That's great. So we can step. And when we step again, we had a breakpoint in the go outside method. So VS Code is going to jump to that other breakpoint. It's actually going to jump to the other file. So that's pretty cool. And so we're in this go outside method now. We're stopped. And we can now see the result of the cool math formula, 15 times 100 times 11 divided by 60. The result of this was 275. So we're kind of now, we jumped from the main method to the go outside method, and we can see the variables in here. They have the values in a ton of places, but you can always look over on this local side of things. And so this actually helps us understand the control flow of the program. So what we can do here is we can either step over, and that'll go one line at a time, or we could also just hit continue. Cool. I think that's basically all we have to show here, and we can, look at some other stuff in another video, but this goes through the basics of setting things up and going through the debugger. So just the basics.